the 1000 Hours Outside podcast. My name is Ginny Urich, and I could not be more excited today to have Steve Rinella on. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and thanks for waiting for me to get set up here.
So thrilled. I've had so many people reach out and ask if you could be on the podcast with your book coming out. In fact, like 3 minutes ago, I just got an email. Have you thought of having on? I'm
Oh,
telling people,
really?
well, he's huge. I don't know if I can get him on our podcast. So I am so grateful. I know people are going to be so excited. They've been posting your book in our Facebook group and all sorts of things. So you have a brand new book. It's a good one. I loved it. Outdoor Kids in an Inside World, Getting Your Family Out of the House and Radically Engaged with Nature. Congrats. Congrats. This is book
Well,
number 8, right?
yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, it came out, just recently, and um, I've been through this a few times, but every time, you go through this process, it's like, I don't know, it's always an emotional journey, to
Yeah.
put something like this out into the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, it is. And 8 times you've done it. So congrats to you. And I know it's number one in nature and number one in camping and hiking guides and all these things. So congratulations. And really it's an extremely impactful book. I really enjoyed it. Mine's dirty. I've been taking it along with me on some of our outdoor adventures. So it's a perfect little size to throw in your bag. And just once again, thank you. I know that when you book launch and you're busy anyways, you've got your TV show and all the other things, but book launch is especially busy. So thanks so much for hanging out here for a little bit. Let me read a little bit of your bio. You're a father, outdoorsman, writer, wild foods enthusiast, creator, and host of television show MeatEater and the MeatEater Podcast. This is your 8th book. You got 7 others, 3 kids, and you guys, y'all live in Montana.
That's right. We live in Southwest Montana in Bozeman.
That's awesome. Well, so this book, what I really loved about it, Stephen, is that it was relatable and unrelatable all at the same time. You sort of did this masterful job of bringing the unrelatable things and making them very intriguing and enticing and also were relatable at the same time too with all the things that you've done with your kids. So I was wondering if we could talk about there was some vocabulary and phrases and things I'd never heard. Some of the things I think you made up. Um, and then some of the other ones were just things that I'd never come in contact with. So would you be up for talking about some of those?
Oh no, this is great. This is you've set this up to be a question I'm excited because this is a question no one's asked. So
All
this
right,
is
all right.
good.
So can you talk about wearing it dry?
Oh, yes. I so I don't I have a little bit of I think I explained this a little bit. I have an organizational problem. It's like bad. I like in my home, I like clean surfaces. I like a lot of things that don't go hand in hand with having kids. I like clean surfaces. I'm like an organization freak, and I
Okay.
really have to hold it in to not bring everyone around me down. And it's because it's
Yeah.
like a bit of a joke in my family that my kids tease me about it. Anyhow, when going places, I don't like to pack a lot of extra clothing and things, especially with the kids, because it winds up being that it's all wet. They get soaked, they get full of mud. It's just stuff laying everywhere.
Mhm.
They go through it super fast, and then I propose this idea because I do it myself. Is like we call it like wearing it dry, meaning once you get your clothes wet, you get your clothes wet in the rain, you get your clothes wet, playing in a creek, whatever. If you throw it in the corner of the cabin, or throw it in the corner of a tent, or throw it in the trunk of a car, it will be wet through the end of time, right? It's just not going to dry,
Gonna
pile up in the house.
smell.
So the thing is, you just wear it, and it dries extremely quickly when you just wear it. So when going, like my wife and I'll constantly have this dispute. She'd be like, "We're going for 4 days." I'm like, "Well, if we're going for 4 days, pack 2 days worth of clothes. That what if they get wet? They'll wear it dry. They'll wear it dry." And that's just my way of saying, let's not bring a bunch of stuff. If they get wet, they'll wear it. It'll dry out, and they'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, this is great advice. I thought there were so many funny parts in your book. that, and that helps you remember the different concepts. You say you wear the same pants while you're camping, and then you have this wearing it dry and this experience with your son, and your wife wanted you to bring more clothes and you didn't, and you talk about there's this, tension between the, spouses. So it really helps you to remember the different
Yeah, I
concepts.
do. Am I allowed to tell you what the story I tell about wearing it dry? Am I allowed to tell you what why it's become kind of a family punchline, the wearing it dry
Is
thing?
it the story
Is
from the book?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Tell it for the people who haven't read it. It's funny. I'm
my
sure it wasn't funny at the
boy, my
time.
youngest boy, no, my youngest boy, I don't remember how old he was. He was just getting done with diapers, and we have this big conversation about wearing it dry. We're going up to Southeast Alaska where it's an area that gets 13 feet of rain every year.
Wow.
So legitimately 169 inches of precipitation, like everything's soaked. But I proposed the wearing it dry plan because if not, everything will just be wet and it'll just be laying in a wet pile. So they're gonna be wet anyways. Just we'll start a fire in the wood stove and they'll dry out while they eat dinner. So we don't bring any really many extra clothes at all. And my son right away wades out into the water. It's like wades out, waist deep water. And my wife goes out and gets him in, and we're having this like wear it dry thing. And then she looks, and he's had an accident in his pants. And so she's like, "You gonna wear that dry too?" Right? And that became kind of the wear it dry punchline there. I recently had an opportunity to. My boy always goes over his rubber boots, like you get those little muck boots, rubber knee boots.
Mhm.
Anytime he comes near water, he goes over his boots. And I can never understand, like, why not just go into the water until right up
Mhm.
to, and then don't why? And I was irritated with him and really pressing him, like, why? I just want to know why do you go over the top of your boots in the water? And when pressed for an explanation, he told me that he doesn't like to look down. So therefore he's not aware. He's not aware that he's that deep because he doesn't like looking down. I thought
Oh,
I was like, that's great. That's a very satisfying answer. Thank you for
there we
that.
go. You got to look up. Oh, I think that wearing it dry is great. How about the poison weight?
Mm, yeah. I want to. Okay, this has to do with wild mushrooms,
Yeah.
and I want to point out that I do not do the poison weight with my children, but it would be that if you're a wild mushroom enthusiast, and I used to be more than I am. And when I say enthusiast, I mean that like to go and find and identify new types of wild mushrooms. I remember one time before having kids, I was in the Idaho Panhandle. I went to college across the state line in Montana, and I remember we found in one weekend along the St. Joseph River, we found 9 species of wild edible mushroom,
Wow.
and but it must have been 7 of them I hadn't found before, right? And you're using this is pre-internet in its current form, and you're using field guides where you're actually keying mushrooms, and it's
Mhm.
telling you like things like spore prints, right? Like you
Wow.
put the mushroom on a white surface and you'll get a beige spore print, not to be confused with a tan spore print. But you do your best to identify it. And I would get to a certain level of certainty about what I was looking at, and then we would cook the mushrooms and eat them. And then it was the poison weight. Was sort of the hour after, where you're sitting there being like, man, that we, I sure hope we identified it right. And it was always
Mhm.
like I thought it was like a really exhilarating. It was sort of a really exhilarating period of time to wait and see if something bad was going to happen to you. Um, the only time I've ever gotten actually sick from mushrooms, um, I was eating something that I was almost positive, like I was positive it was a queen bleat,
Hmm.
easy to identify, ate it without any consideration, and then got sick. and then later learned from a mycologist. I was in Alaska, and later learned from a mycologist that she's like, strange thing. A lot of people that eat queen boletes just fine will eat them in Alaska and get sick on them, which is just something I hadn't turned up in my research. When
Wow.
I point out that I play it very safe with my kids, we eat. The other day we found some morels at springtime. So the other day we
Hmm.
found some morels and we ate those, and you can't mess that up.
Right.
We eat some oyster mushrooms. You can't mess that up. But I would never put them in a situation.
Right.
I'm
Sure.
not just being like polite. I'm not being polite right now, because my wife would kill me. It just everything bad would happen if they
Yeah.
got in
Well,
any
you
way,
talked
shape,
about it
or
in the
form
book.
sick from a mushroom. Yeah,
Yeah, it's something that you used to do. And so you had that
yeah.
phrase in there, the poison weight. So I liked, I'd never heard that before. Okay, you talk about um, finding razor clams at the show.
Oh, yeah. I didn't. I grew up in Michigan,
Oh,
so
we're from Michigan.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in Michigan at this very second. So I grew up in Michigan. We didn't have salt. We didn't have saltwater clams. We had freshwater clams, but those aren't eaten because they're biotoxins, and
Hmm.
there's widely regarded as freshwater clams are widely regarded as not safe for human consumption. But we lived for a time in Seattle, and Seattle's a big city, right? It's like one of the themes I talk about in the book is that you can't take no for an answer. Like if you're gonna create outdoor experiences for your kids, you just have to set in your mind. You have to like, we're doing this, and I don't care. Like nothing's gonna stand in my way,
Hmm.
because for people that live in cities, and I had my first two kids in New York, I had my third kid in Seattle. Like, we spent a lot of time in the cities, and we spent a lot of time being very deliberate about creating opportunities. So when I was living in Seattle, I would hear about digging for razor clams, and it'd be a thing you could do, and you could do an hour drive out of Seattle and go dig for razor clams. And the razor clam, he's about the size of maybe about half the size of your palm, right? And he lives deep down, but he's got this long neck that the clam, a siphon that the
Hmm.
clam puts up to the surface, and it sits right below the surface, and he just sucks in sediment and it filters out stuff he wants to eat. When they get scared, vibration scares them, so they can tell something's coming, right? They can
Hmm.
tell a predator's approaching on the surface, and when you do that, you create like a little seismic activity, right? You're shaking the ground. So he retracts that siphon, and it creates like a small vacuum at the surface. So as you're walking along on the mud flat, like where the tides receded, it's just like wet mud, and you'll see this little dimple, and they'll call that the show. And different clams have different shows, and some of the clam shows last for a moment. A razor clam show is, I say it's like, I think I say this, the definition of ephemeral. It's like it's sub, it's way sub a second.
Wow.
When he retracts that siphon, like there's no, his presence isn't demonstrated when it's there. It's just him pulling it away creates this little pucker, like a dime sized little pucker at the
Wow.
sand. And it's so fast that you don't actually like, you realize you don't really see it. You just remember seeing it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like it
Yeah.
happens so
Yeah.
fast, you're sort of like left like remembering, some part of your brain's like, no, I just saw that. Even though it's gone, it was there for a moment.
Hmm.
And when you're trying to show your kids things, it helps to have, right? Like, it helps to have very clear demonstrations of things, It'd be like,
Hmm.
that is an apple. It's red,
Right.
right? It's hanging on a tree. It'll be
Yeah.
there in an hour, right? Like that's an apple. Uh, to explain a razor clam show when I myself am not that clear about it was a lot of fun. And we kind of got it down in this day. I
Yeah.
explained, we sort of got it down to find a show, and
And you have a
it
tube.
was that. Yeah, and
You have a tube.
that was one of the nicest of many nice days. That was one of the nicest days I
Mhm.
spent with my kids. All
Wow.
three of them was like
That's
out
so
there
cool.
trying to learn a razor clam show.
Wow. Yeah. Well, what's really cool about your book, Stephen, is that, you know, it didn't leave me feeling like guilty, or even like, oh, I wish I could do all these different things. It was just super interesting, to learn about that in these different geographical locations, that there's these really cool things that you can do depending on where you live. I love that you had this theme through the entire book. I think all the way through, woven through, about life lessons when kids get outside. Um, and one of my one of my favorite sentences was when you said, "We do these hard things so that you can hang out with cool people when you're older." Uh,
Yeah, that
right?
yeah, that's become something of a joke with my kids too, because I say it all the time, but they still don't really understand what I mean when I say it, right?
But you become an interesting person, and then people, they're interested in what you have to
Yeah.
say. But so you talk about different life lessons, dealing with impermanence, increased tolerance. Um, what are kids missing when they're inside all the time?
Well, you step out of a when you go outside, you step outside of a controlled environment. Um, and you step into a place where there are very immediate factors at play that defy your understanding, that aren't quickly remedied, and that you can't adjust. Like, you're not going to be able to adjust it, so you learn to sort of cope with it and live with it, and get into like expecting the unexpected. Meaning, if in an in-home life, and we have an in-home life, right? Like, maybe for whatever reason you're trying to buy a movie, on the Apple platform, and for whatever reason you can't because of some glitch, right? It's disappointing, but
Mhm.
you wind up being you're frustrated with this very tangible, addressable issue, right? You need
Right.
to go in and troubleshoot the computer, but it's like you're frustrated because something didn't work out the way you want, but it's still like it's a very man-made problem, and you immediately go to how to solve it.
Mhm.
Outside, if you go into situations like we just spent a weekend out camping in our camper, so sort of camping in our camper, and we knew going in it was just gonna be like cold, and it was gonna
Yeah.
rain like unseasonably, right? And nothing. There's no, I would never change the plan. Like, we're still gonna go, and there's no customer service department that's gonna like handle
Mhm.
this problem. So you get these issues of like dealing with the cold, of accepting some things that aren't the way you want them to be, and learning to adapt it because you don't call the shots. Like, life
Yeah.
is there's dynamic aspects to life. There's things you hope to happen, but you can't because it's disappointing. It's one of the things. I talk a lot about fishing in the book. I like to fish with my kids. Um, it's a thing where you can't even the greatest scientific minds, like the greatest biological minds, have not been able to explain to everyone's satisfaction why some days fish won't bite. We just don't know.
Wow.
And so to
Mhm.
spend time in that frustration of
Yeah.
why, and then all of a sudden the sun kind of set, and all of a sudden you caught all kinds of fish. Why? Like, what trip are these fish on?
Mhm.
We'll never know, but it opens up all these areas of exploration. And I try really hard to point out in the book, I am not a perfect father at
Yeah.
all. I'm not a perfect husband at all. I'm a far cry
Mhm.
from it. But what I have developed in the 12 years I've spent now, like, I've 12 years of fatherhood behind me. um, I've developed a certain subject matter expertise around the rewards,
Mhm.
difficulties, challenges of like trying to get kids outside. And I don't say always like getting them outside, what it's like trying to get them outside, you know?
Mhm.
And the same things I find, the same things that wind up probably being most rewarding, those challenges, like the being cold, the being wet, the being bored, the not finding what you're after. Um, those challenges are not fun as they're happening. It's always better if it's warm. It's always better if it's sunny. It's always better if mosquitoes aren't biting. But
Right.
those very challenges become the things that I think give kids what I would like them to get from the experience, which is an ability to accept what can't be changed,
Mhm.
to learn how to cope with it, and to have some physical tenacity, some physical and
Right.
mental tenacity, and know that everything isn't solved by turning a dial up or down.
Right. Yeah, you talk about that in your book, but the heater and the air conditioning and um you mentioned the documentary Happy People, with the guy and he had
Mm-hmm.
mosquitoes all over his back and he had a high level of tolerance and that, you say you can't learn these things other ways, only through practice. Um, and then also an opportunity, I think, for the parent, or the guardian, whoever is with the kids to increase their muscles in dealing with all of the different types of things because things go wrong. Uh, you know, Probably one of my favorite sentences in the whole book was when you said, your spouse has made a dozen nasty comments about the things that you failed to pack. That's
Mm-hmm.
so relatable, but I think as a parent too, your kids are learning, but we're learning too to be stretched. I liked what you said at the beginning about being an organization freak and that doesn't go hand in hand with parenting. And so we also have to grow in these situations.
Oh, it's I remember, I don't want to, a dear friend of mine, and hopefully enough time has gone by that he won't remember telling me this. Um, he's a wonderful guy. I'm not going to say his name, but he works really hard. He's got a demanding job, right? And he's on the kind of schedule where uh, he's got a couple weeks of it. He's got 2 weeks of vacation, right?
Hmm.
And other than that, he's working. He's like coaching, kids sports, and he's just busy all the time. And he was explaining to me one time, he's an avid deer hunter. And I was like, well, man, we're talking about what that's going to be like after having done all that with just his buddies, what it's going to be like now that he is going to be doing that with his young kids, the challenges presented. And he
Hmm.
kind of had a thing. He's like, and let me tell you something. I have 2 weeks a year that are my time. That's not going to change. But this is
Hmm.
my time. And he's a beloved friend, a great
Yeah.
dad. But I remember thinking, like, man, you can't. I don't know that I said it to him, but I was like, that approach can't work,
Mm.
right? It's like like that thing you love. You need to bring your kids out to have them see what it's like to be with someone that loves this thing.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
demonstrate the enthusiasm,
Yeah.
right? To like this. If you had every year, if you had 2 free weeks, there's the one thing you want to go do. I was like, how would you not want to show your kids what the
Hmm.
thing when you really have time to really do the thing you love? Like, don't you want them to see you love it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the thing I think about all the time is like, we have these kind of fun arguments, even with some guys at work. We have these fun arguments about sports and skiing, and 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 there's certain things I don't do with my kids, right, that are pretty normal. Like I don't want them to get involved. Not that if they really wanted to, I wouldn't prevent them, but I don't hope for them to get involved in organized sports to have a big weekend commitment, because I
Right.
like for us to go camping and stuff on the weekends.
Right.
And we'll laugh about that, but like, but I have a certain bag of like tricks, right? I have a certain passion for something. So if my
Yeah.
passion was football, then I think we would share, like, we would have that passion together. I would demonstrate my passion to them that way. It just so
Yeah.
happens that my passion is in the outdoors. So why not show them that? Like, why not
Yeah.
show them that relationship? I think that they're going to get more from witnessing the relationship that they can then apply when they become their own people and they become older and they have their own personalities and their own passions. They'll probably remember, like, what it's like to see someone experience a lifestyle that makes them feel alive,
Right.
right? As much as like, here's how you catch XY type of
Right.
fish,
Well, and you think
they'll be
about,
like,
yeah, that there's kids that have never seen that have never seen an adult passionate about life, and in that
yeah,
environment.
it's they know that you get burned out at work, right?
Hmm.
They know you come home and you sort of, with a smile on your face, sort of like begrudgingly make dinner. They know that you kind of like begrudgingly clean up. They know that you'd wish they'd brush their teeth and get the pajamas on the first time you asked, right? And this is, I'm not trying to I'm not like condemning everyday life. Like everyday life is wonderful, so it's a gift. But there's that, and then there's like seeing, their caregiver, seeing their parent in action, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
doing it.
what brings them
I
to
think
life, inviting
yeah,
them
it's
into the
important.
into that world of adults, that world of, and it's their world too, but this world of adults where you're making decisions and choosing things that make you come alive.
Hmm.
And I like what you
Yeah.
said, because then they're going to have their own things, whatever those things are, as they grow older, and then hopefully they choose those too, instead of, you know, sitting on the couch. And I think, Steve, you are so um humble and so accessible in the way that you talked in this book about being irritated yourself, and about, the arguments with the spouse, and um, about the times that, kids aren't always happy, and they're crying about different things, but that in the end it always seems worth it, you
Yeah, it was
know
funny starting a project like this. I was very aware of, um, well, let me put it this way. We have a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends that have spent a lot of time with my kids, right? And
hmm
I got a lot of friends that have seen me just lose, you know, my composure. I've got a lot, right? So for me to come and write something where I paint this like incredibly rosy picture
hmm
would feel like so hypocritical to me, where, people be like, oh man, I was over at their house the other day, and they're having this big debate about iPads. What are you talking about? Like
yeah,
it's not like it's not like a totally rosy scenario. So I thought, I gotta really go out of my way here to make it clear all the areas in which like I don't have it figured out.
yeah,
I point out in there that it is in our household, technology, screens, however you want to put it, is a daily conversation. It's a daily
hmm
conversation. It'd be like, that doesn't look like your homework, or he's supposedly doing his homework on, and then you come up and you see he really kind of quickly closes some windows out on the computer. You're like,
hmm
well, what was that all about? Oh no, nothing, nothing. Right? It's all the time, all the time.
yeah,
But I feel like I win enough of the arguments to get through it. But I don't think there's any way to escape that. I don't think there's any way to escape that kind of tension. And maybe some people have, but I'm a little to hear that someone doesn't have the areas in their life where they've fallen a little short. I feel like there might not be being entirely honest.
yeah. I think what it does is it allows people to say, look, I'm scared to camp, but, maybe my kid's not going to have poop in their pants at least, or whatever the
Yeah,
thing. I mean, you're like,
sure.
or
Yeah,
if they
exactly.
do, or if they do, well, then they're like, well, this guy had that happen too, and it's not that big of a deal. And, you even talk about going home early, even though, you didn't want to go home early, and all these types of things. And it makes it seem like, oh, well, I'll try it then. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I thought that was such a cool part of your book. And you also just had
When
so
I
many.
was
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, when I was working on the book, like uh, a friend sent me this article based on conversations we were having about the book. They sent me this article, and I even quote the individual. It's not it's the names escape me right now, but it's someone who is inviting parents to consider the amount of power they have over a situation,
Mm,
to set the mood,
yeah,
the amount of influence you have over the mood in the room.
yeah. I
You
wrote
know what
that
I
down.
mean?
I wrote that down.
Yeah,
It says
and
the adult.
that really
Yeah.
struck me, because in terms of things, admitting when things aren't perfect.
Mm,
um I had I was raised, my dad was wonderful about a lot of things, and always took us outside, put a very, very strong emphasis on family time, very strong emphasis on being in the outdoors, but was also a really, at times, a very hard person to be around.
mm,
Like, demanding and patient, right? Fly
yeah.
off the handle about things. And I wish that, that he might have taken the time to see that, and comprehended it the way I did, or looked at it the way I had, this idea of like, just pause and consider how much power you have to influence the mood around you.
Wow.
And and I don't know that he did that. And that's one of the things that I really try to do. And my wife points out to me as well. She's like, we can wake up in the morning and go down to have breakfast. And the minute we walk in, we've already set the mood.
Wow.
Like, you set the mood, and it becomes entrenched, man. And I think that in that time spent outside is like, just like trying like deliberately to be like, I have to be careful because I'm the one who holds the power here in the mood set.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the areas where I've tried my hardest to improve as a parent, because
Wow.
I have that power, and I guess I've abused the power and neglected the power at times.
Those parts of the book really stuck out to me quite a bit. I wrote them down. The adult is the decisive element whose daily mood makes the weather. What a statement.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, it's a big one. And our kids take our cues from us. So, when things are going poorly, I think that shows your growth too, so over the past 12 years. And I think that's a cool thing about adventuring with kids. It's harder. I liked what you even talked about with camping. You say, of course it's harder, it's in many ways harder. But you say, we always come away with the fact that we just pulled something off well worth doing, and we ought to do it again soon. So it's this odd thing, that it's harder, but in some ways easier. It increases your connections and gives you more grit, and then you learn for the next time what you can do better. What would you say? You talk about obstacles. Your kids are 12, like 12, 10, and 8 or so. Is that how old
Yeah,
they are?
my 7, 9,
Okay.
and 12.
7, 9, and 12. And you talk about, that these different obstacles at different stages. Obviously when they're little, it's the naps and the diapers um, and sleeping. What would you say to parents who say there's too many obstacles?
Well, I think that one is to try to be. I'll tell you what has worked for us is to try to think ahead and picture situations. Right. Like, let me give you. Well, I realize that I should touch on the obstacles. Like, for us right now, where we're at now, we used to be at the obstacles were nap time. Obstacles were, this like really tight regimen of like eating, right? For a long time, those obstacles of the breastfeeding obstacles my wife had to deal with, like all these things. Now it's obstacles of technology and becoming increasingly obstacles of social life for the kids. Like, because they're friends, right? They got friends, and they're getting at an age where they make plans at school with friends, and they feel like a sense of commitment that they told someone they're going to do a thing in it. And to them, and you kind of want to laugh it off. It's like, it's as real to them as it is when you make a plan with somebody. Like, they said they're going to do something, and so they have these lives of their own. We recently, looking ahead, it was springtime, we're looking ahead even into late summer, and we're like, we're surprised to see that we have a local area we like to go camp close to home. And it was some of our, really nice weekends last year. And we were sort of surprised to see that we only had 3 weekends out of the whole summer that we would go to have this like quiet family time camping near the house. And so we had the, wherever like we'll be at grandma's, we'll be up at a, up fishing at a place in Alaska. But like, in terms of just like one thing that means a lot to us, we didn't have that much of it. Not as much as we seeing that as far off as possible, and taking some steps to remedy it months in advance. Right. That was one of the ways to deal with the obstacles. The other thing is, we'll now and then take a weekend, and we know we're going to do something, and we let everyone know so that there's no surprise, and we'll build a sort of momentum. It's hard to let's say you're just gonna go spend a day on the water, spend a day down by the river, swimming and have a picnic, whatever it is. It's at the age our kids are now, they're not as sort of like loosey goosey about time as they once were. So it's hard on
Right.
Saturday morning to be like, ta-da, right? Because
Right.
they have this thing in their head of like how it's going to go. But if we tell them, if I was to now start laying the groundwork for a week from now, which to them is a long time away still, I'm like, next weekend, this is what's happening, right? And every day it's like, this is what's happening, that thing. There's very little resistance
Hmm.
because they've kind of like built it in,
Yeah.
and so we're finding now that you kind of have to, the same way you'd be with friends,
Right.
at this point in time, I know that I can't on a Saturday call a friend of mine on a Saturday morning and propose that we go away for the day, because like there's 100 reasons why. It's starting to treat them more like how you treat your peers, in
Yeah.
allowing that, like we're setting aside time and we're going to be deliberate about it. This is the thing we're going to do. That really cuts back on the resistance.
It's really interesting because actually it feels like it's setting a path
Oh,
forward, right? If you have a son that's 12, it's like, well, when they're an adult, and our oldest is 13, in 10 years, that's how we're going to be doing it, right? Which is, making plans ahead of time and hoping that they still choose here and there to come adventure with us. I really like that. I think the point is too, is that there's always obstacles. And I think that that is a theme in the book, right? So it's like, well, you can't wait till there's no obstacles because they're just going to be different obstacles. And we're kind of in the same boat as you, right? Where the kids they're having their own lives and now it's trickier to find the time. And so it's not that there are no obstacles, it's just that they're different. So you got to
yeah.
just jump in and deal.
I think like every kid develops at a different pace, and no two people are the same way. But I would say, if I was going to pick like a age where there's the least amount of friction,
Hmm.
I would say it's probably our 7-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Uh, you can spring things on him, right? He most days still wakes up and asks if he's going to school today. Like just the whole sort of, right. He hasn't gotten like, you go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he's like,
Yeah.
is today a school day? It's like, yeah, buddy, today's school day. So, but he's pretty self-sufficient. Like you can tell him to go up in his room and get dressed. You can tell him to pack his backpack. You can tell him to grab some snacks, get a water bottle, right? But he's also just easy. He
Yeah.
doesn't have plans, and but it's a short window. I
It
mean,
sure is. And if you have
it's a
multiple
short window.
kids, if you have multiple kids, they're not all seven at the same time unless you got triplets or whatever, which some people do. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that was another
hard.
that's another obstacle I talk about in the book, is dealing with people when they're really young. You have people that, one's raring to go, and if you have multiple kids, like one's raring to go and one's not.
Yeah.
Um, and that can make you just kind of be like, well, never mind. Like we'll never get it worked
Yeah,
out.
right. You talked about the obstacle of dealing with the disapproval of others, which I thought was actually a really interesting one.
Yeah, that was particularly like, um, you know, when we lived in Seattle, and I don't mean to act like this is like necessarily location wise, but in large, like we have certain disciplines and certain pursuits we engage in that some people view as controversial. I think it's unwarranted, but they do. Like we do a lot
Right.
of hunting, we do a lot of fishing, and so living in some urban areas where people just have zero familiarity
Right.
with that, some of those practices might seem, that our kids have exposure to. They learned how to shoot guns at an early age, and we have like a lot of safety protocols. We learned to shoot guns at an early age. We spend time out and spend time out on the ocean in small boats. We do
Yeah.
things. We spend time in grizzly bear, a lot of time in grizzly bear country, and it could be things where people would kind of look and, you'd sort of, you can feel it a little bit, of that you're kind of like the reckless ones, or
Mm,
you're doing a thing that you shouldn't do, or that's dangerous, or I don't want my kid to play over there. I mean, these are all
yeah.
things we've encountered, and I think
Yeah.
that at this point, at first I would feel a little bit like I wanted to explain myself more. I might have been more willing to engage,
Hmm.
but after a while of being at this, I'm kind of more like, if that's not something, if that's not something you want your family to be around, or that's not a thing that you want your kid to be exposed to if they're over our house, that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with it. But
Yeah.
this is what we have. This is what we have going on,
Yeah.
and we're on this path, and we're not going to be changing our path.
Yeah. I like that.
Love you. Like, I love and respect you, but it just, this is what's happening over here.
Right. I like what you talked about. You talked about the campfire, and the kids our kids do this. They take the stick and they smolder it, and they're waving their smoke in the air, and that that these things are teaching them situational awareness. And so you are really clear throughout all the whole book about how you just systematically and very intentionally teach your children about these different things while you're doing it. It's not willy nilly. There's a lot of thought behind it, and a lot of baby steps along the way. Uh, the book is really fantastic at making things seem accessible. Um, and just giving ideas within stories so that they're easier to remember. How about one last topic? Because I think this is a topic that's near and dear to all of us, is kids being entertained. And I think as parents and caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
we really want our kids to be entertained. We don't want them to be bugging us, and I think that's why the toy store shelves are always glimmering. But you talk about minnow nets, these simple things. They played hundreds of hours with minnow nets. You know, I mean, this is
Oh,
really what we're
yeah.
wanting as parents, right? You know, um, so so what is it about nature that sort of makes parenting a little bit easier in that sense of kids being entertained?
There's a there's a term that I talk about in the book, and it was popularized by a biologist named E.O. Wilson, and it's a term called biophilia. And the definition of the word is that humans, or the idea, the concept is that humans have an innate desire to connect with other life forms. I think that biophilia runs, uh, you know, runs really strong in kids,
Yeah.
like outrageously strong through kids. Just to go out into some kind of, whether it's underneath a rotting log, along the shoreline and some weeds, just to see what's there. And I think that you can help that, right? You can help that a little bit by giving them some pointers about the best places to look to encounter these other life forms. I talk a lot about that my kids like to roll rocks along the tide line, along the ocean, because you flip the rock and there's a bunch of crabs and stuff running away. Maybe, I don't remember, I maybe at some point took my kids down and was like, hey, check this out, right? And rolled a rock. Or I'm sure at some point I took them out and showed them when you flip a rotten log over out in the woods and there's all these centipedes and roly-polies that go scurrying. But then it creates a thing for them to spend a lot of time by themselves doing. And one of the best purchases we've ever made is, and we've had to buy them more than once because they get worn out, is buy them these little dip nets, little minnow nets, and
Yeah.
they can wander around, wading around in the water, seeing what all water bugs and stuff they catch in these nets. Where I explain in the book, like where I have a sort of personal tension would be that you want them to be able to play unsupervised, right? You want them to just be able to entertain themselves. On the other hand, you kind of want to show them things. Like if you really want to catch something with a beach saying, like a 2-person net that you kind of drag, right? If you really want to catch something, here's how you do it, right? You hold it at this angle and you do it this way. And then all of a sudden you're sort of at it, and they're not at it. So I always struggle with, how do you get them up to speed, like get them poised to make cool discoveries,
Right.
it's not really on subject, but my youngest boy really wanted a metal detector, and so he got a metal detector for Christmas. We've been out messing with his metal detector, and I'm kind of like, he just wants to take the metal detector and go. But I'm always like, no, because we're going to do this to the settings and you're supposed to do it this way. And in his mind, he's like, no, he just wants to go, right? And I'm like, well, if you really want to find something cool, and it's like, give me the metal detector because I'll show you how to, I struggle with this all the time because he just wants to cut loose and I'm trying to impose he just wants to explore, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
impose like a level of discipline and impose expertise,
Right.
and I don't think it's one or the other, right? There's a
Yeah.
balance there to be
Balance.
struck.
Right. Ah, super interesting. Well, Steve, I want to thank you again so much for taking this time. Like I said, I know you're so swamped, and this is just such a gift to me and to our whole audience. I know they're so unbelievably excited about this. I really truly enjoyed your book so much, Outdoor Kids in an Inside World. Stephen, people can get it obviously on Amazon, wherever books are sold. Can they get it on your website, themeateater.com as well?
Oh, thank you very much. Hey, did we cut out? Or are you still good?
Yeah, I lost you for 1 second.
Okay. I turned my video off because I thought maybe that would help with the connection because I don't know
Yeah.
if it's on my end. But do you feel like you
Um,
got okay audio though?
yeah, it's great.
Okay, great.
Real quick, um, well, I'll add at the end. Do you want to add anything else about where people can find your book? Um, I think everyone knows everything about you.
Oh no, I think you got it covered. I mean, it's just wherever,
Yeah.
like
Can we end with
wherever books are sold. But
one quick question? And I know people can find you on your website as well. Your website is phenomenal. There's so much information there. I was blown away. How to fish at night, 3 best tasting invasive plants to forage this spring, how to make pasta. I mean, this is just a fantastic website, themeateater.com. So, and your books are wherever books are sold. Outdoor Kids in an Inside World is fantastic. So we're here in Michigan, and I know you grew up near Muskegon. Um,
yeah.
in Michigan, we always end our podcast with a favorite outdoor childhood memory of yours.
Oh man, I got a lot of them. But as summer's coming on, I remember that when we were little, I grew up in this little lake, not little, it was 66-acre lake, and when the water started warming up, it was time to go swimming. I think that for whatever reason we had in our minds that we really like to swim in like a torrential rain. So if it was raining out, we always kind of wanted to go get, me and my siblings and friends, we always wanted to go get in the water. And I remember it caused my mom a lot of anxiety because, like, of course, you don't want to get like a lightning strike, but also at the same time, she doesn't want to she didn't want to, squash this enthusiasm to do this thing. And so I just, as with the summer coming on and think about Michigan stuff, I think about like those times my mom standing on the porch where you could see out on the lake and her kind of monitoring the thunderheads and waiting when it was like time to make the call that everybody's going to get their butts out of the water, get their butts out of the water, right?
Yep.
And I'll have my kids this summer. We'll visit. My mom still lives in the same house I was brought up in, and we get to spend some time there around the 4th of July. So they'll be able to go swim in that off the same dock.
That's the best.
Yeah, swim in the same lake where I used to swim, right?
Michigan summers are gorgeous. Well, thank you, Stephen. So appreciate it. Just absolutely loved your book so much. And thanks for spending this time with us.
Yep. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.